of this actually is a smaller room because I can't use that. We're doing such a cheap things.
Actually, I'm going to post it right now because obviously they didn't over behind of him, but the outlet. I think I'm going to try to zoom in slightly on the
Because we literally only use the footage from the camera if we need to show a brief clip of the audience. Or the person talking. You know, you see it.
I heard them talking about it.
Oh yeah, I always have it. I had to turn it down. Actually, I don't think I ever have that interaction. Because it's always in that case, not the FS700 case. Because I have to take this, I have to take it back because he's going to Utah. Alright, what was that?
I got two of those Team USA girls who give me their emails. So like, how do you guys get money? We didn't get money. And I'm like, we can show you.
This section right there. Back over here. I was just moving it. I didn't know.
No, like that way.
This way? No. There isn't. I know. It's stupid. There aren't any outlets anywhere in the middle. could just make an announcement.
Chicago, Illinois. Started this organization called Turning Point USA when I was 18 years old. Decided not to go to college. Wasn't probably intelligent enough to get into good schools like all of you, so I decided to go do something different with my time. I found that there was a great amount of enthusiasm and interest for these particular values, principles, and ideas that are more on the conservative side, mostly on the economics issues. And so year after year, we grew this organization from nothing. Madison has played a big part in helping get this organization off the ground here in Minnesota, and now we're present on over 1,200 college and high school campuses across the country. We expect over 2,500 students at our year-end retreat in less than 2 weeks in Palm Beach. And so we are a student movement across the country fighting for free markets and free people. But in essence, I'm going to talk about a little bit more of a wide variety of issues tonight that will definitely pique some interest and hopefully gain up some enthusiasm and some disagreement, I'm sure, from my Soviet comrades over here. So that'll be good, because that worked out so well. So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation there. So if you like what you hear, you can applaud or boo or stand up, but I just do ask that we're respectful of differing opinions and perspectives. I know all of you that are more on the conservative side, you have to listen to liberal nonsense all day long in your lecture hall. So I ask out of the liberals that don't get to hear from conservatives all day long, allow at least the conservative speaker to finish a thought. I was at Cleveland State University about a month and a half ago, and I didn't even get 10 seconds into the speech before it was pretty much a combat battle, the entire speech. We don't want, if it ends up tonight, that's fine, good luck, but then we'll still have some fun. So first I want to kind of get into what is a conservative, what do I identify? So I would say first and foremost, I identify more as a conservatarian, which is a blend of conservative libertarian, right? So I believe, first and foremost, like many people in our generation, I would say Generation Z and most of college students who would self-identify somewhere within these particular values, principles, and ideas. So first and foremost, we believe that the individual matters tremendously, that free people making free ideas in a free society are best not just for the individual, but for people, all people in general. That freedom actually, when put in practice, is a very good thing. That free market capitalism is the greatest economic system ever tried by man, and that America is the greatest country in the history of the world. So we'll start with that one. America is the greatest country in the history of the world, despite what some people might tell you and all the America bashing that's going on in this country right now, and the flagrant anti-Americanism found in our universities. America, by far, has the greatest track record of economic output, individual generosity, and it is the most diverse country in the world. We're going to get you a mic soon, and it's not going to end well. And if you're going to keep on mocking me, I'm going to tell you it's going to end just like it did for your mother, Russia country. Not very well. So let me tell you, it's not going to be exactly pretty. So you can keep, I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds, and then it's going to get. You're going to get decimated intellectually. So anyway, America is the greatest country in the history of the world. I break it into 3 different categories. We're the most diverse country in the world, linguistically, religiously, ethnically. We take in half of the world's immigrants every year. A lot of people throw America under the bus for being a racist country, undoubtedly have a racist past. But if you look at what we have been able to do as far as bringing different cultures, backgrounds, languages, and religions in this country, it's unprecedented. You look at other European countries, most of which are 90 to 95% same racial, ethnic, and linguistic background. America, if you look at our components of different countries and perspectives and values and beliefs, it's incredible what we've been able to do. We are the most diverse country in the world. Economically, we have 5% of the world's population, yet we contribute to over 70% of the world's economic output. We have 90 out of the top 100 most valuable companies in the world. When people want to start a business, when you want to take a risk, I'll tell you, you don't go to Australia, you go to America. America still, despite what its naysayers continue to put forth against it, is that shining city on a hill. It's a place to take a risk, to create your American dream as you see fit. And finally, our generosity. Despite having 5% of the world's population, roughly 300 million people, Americans voluntarily gave away over $500 billion to charity last year. Think about how much money that is. Still, in this country, unlike many Western European countries, we do not look to government to solve a lot of our problems. We individually give money away to charities, to churches, to synagogues, to mosques, to local hospitals. We believe still, we have this embedded in the fabric of this country that individuals should help individuals. Now, mind you, there's still a lot of components there that people would disagree with, but we still want to help our fellow neighbor. Documented giving to charity, over $500 billion given to charity last year. In Europe, they've almost disappeared. They have almost evaporated, you could say, the entire charitable system. Charity is almost something they don't understand. It's like, wait, you go to charity, we'll just have government take care of people, that are poor. We're going to have government take care of this. In this country, we still have that idea that we're going to look out for our fellow neighbor. Which brings me to my next point. The Constitution is the greatest political document ever written by men. And the Constitution, in its inception, is so different. It's such an unprecedented document that it signaled that for the first time really in human history, the creation of this country that made it so unique, it said, well, we're not going to get our rights from government, but we're going to get our rights from some form of a belief in God or a higher being. Whether it be deist or Judeo-Christian, whatever your belief is, it's that your rights are actually natural. They're given to you upon birth. It's not given out by a government bureaucrat. It's not given out by someone down the street. It's you have them from birth to death, and no one can take them away. Therefore, government's existence should be to protect those rights. It shouldn't be to give them away. It shouldn't be to take them away. That's why we have the Bill of Rights. And you look at the Founding Fathers, and they studied human history, and they studied the rise and fall of the Greek and Roman Empire, and they studied the Chinese Empire, and they studied the British Empire, and they realized commonality, that when power gets centralized far too quickly, bad stuff really starts to happen. That there's incredible amount of corruption, there is centralization, there's abuse of power. So what kind of construct can we create to maximize human freedom, to maximize individual decision making, while also having checks and balances so that there's not going to be a centralized monarch or ruler? It would have been very easy for George Washington to appoint himself king of America, and then he would have just been a subsidiary monarchy next to Britain. Instead, they tried something truly transformational. They first tried the Articles of Confederation. Didn't work out as well. Then they wrote the Constitution. They had the Bill of Rights. What makes it so unique is if you look at the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, each amendment is there for a particular reason. So the Founding Fathers said, well, what if we had this radical idea where people can say what they want, how they want to say it, when they want to say it, as long as it doesn't harm someone else? Well, that's a pretty crazy idea, but let's prevent government from preventing people from being able to do that. That's the First Amendment. Well, we need some right to be able to protect all the other amendments. Well, there's this idea that government gets too powerful is actually quite common. All right, well, we need the Second Amendment so individuals can protect themselves against a usurpacious government. We also need the capacity to disallow government to look into our personal items and our effects and into our private property. Well, that's why we have the Fourth Amendment. And I can go on and on and on. Right to due process. And finally, you go to the 10th Amendment, they say, we didn't hit all these issues, we didn't get it perfect, we think we got it good. Therefore, we need a process of which that we can address future problems. And that's why we have the 10th Amendment, where they said essentially all problems and issues are left to people and left to the states. It's important to point out that the states created the federal government did not create the states. Next point, we as conservatarians, conservatives, members of Turning Point USA, believe that free enterprise is the most moral, effective, and proven economic system for all people. You love that one, don't you? Yeah. Despite what people might say, world poverty is at an all-time low. We have a lot of work to do. There's over 1.3 billion people in India. There's still 400 million people in India that are without toilets. So I'm not saying that world poverty is nearly where it should be. But thanks to free enterprise capitalism and neoliberal policies, we have seen the standard of living increase rise dramatically over the last 20 to 30 years, particularly in Southeast Asia, in Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam and Indonesia and Bangladesh. You are seeing finally free people being able to pursue their ideas. And yes, the wage per day is significantly lower than what it is in the Western world. But if you look at an increase of what it was today versus 20 years ago, there is indisputable increase in standard of living increases in many of these countries. So not only is free enterprise good internationally, but it's been wonderful here domestically. One of the reasons why America has led economically, for particularly in the last 100 years, but especially the last 50, is because we have embraced, we still somewhat to this day embrace it, we're getting away from it, this idea of free enterprise capitalism, that you can come, you can take a risk, you can keep a vast majority of your earnings, and that creating wealth is a good thing. And that if you believe in free enterprise, which I do, is that just because someone gets rich does not mean someone gets poor. I'm going to repeat that. Just because someone gets rich does not mean someone gets poor. Just because someone is able to create a lot of value, take a risk, and start a big company does not mean they stole money from someone else to create that company or to create that amount of wealth. Who is the richest man in the world right now? Jeff Bezos. Not a big fan of him politically. You got to give it to him for what he's been able to create. He created a company that's well worth over $600 billion. He personally is worth over $100 billion. And I'll venture a guess everyone in this room has benefited from Amazon one way or the other. If you say you don't use Amazon, I bet I could prove you otherwise. Netflix, for example, is housed on Amazon Web Services. So you probably have. Don't worry. People say, I don't use Amazon. Okay. You don't use Amazon? Well, okay. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, okay. I'm sure some website server somewhere is housed on an Amazon Web Services server that you use. Anyway, you look at Jeff Bezos. He did not steal from other people to get rich. He provided value. People voluntarily bought his products and goods and services. In fact, he intentionally had his company take a loss for over 15 years. Part of his company is still not profitable. Why? To cut prices so that people can have better goods, better services, and quicker delivery of items. If you look at what Amazon has been able to do disruptively, you can get paper towels, you can get iPhone headphones, you can get almost anything you need in 24 hours or less on Amazon Prime. That would be a concept 40 years ago that people would say, well, there's no way we're ever going to achieve something like that. You look at Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg was worth over $70 billion, right? You can all say, well, I don't use Facebook. You use Instagram, so don't buy it. Instagram's owned by Facebook. Another guy that has created an unbelievable amount of money for himself, but what does he charge you to use Facebook? Anything? No, it's free of charge. So here's a guy that gives something away for free, creates an immensely valuable company, and we are able to use it for free, keep in touch with people instantaneously, be probably far too updated into other people's lives, right, and celebrities' lives. Our lives get better by someone in a free enterprise system who gives something away for free, then he's also able to make himself richer. Goes back to my point, just because someone gets rich does not mean someone gets poor. You contrast that with the failed socialist experiments of the last 100 years. It's been 100 years of failed socialist, communist examples of the last 100 years that has resulted in over 100 million people collectively dead that we know of. That doesn't count the famine and the starvation. That's just the systematic murdering under communist socialist regimes. And you look at the flourishing under free enterprise, Western civilization countries, the difference couldn't be any more dramatic. And you look at free enterprise, what I think is so amazing about it is we are not imposing any sort of viewpoint or value if you live in a free enterprise system. I got in a little discussion, I guess you could say, with a guy that was a self-described libertarian socialist or libertarian communist. Very strange concept, if you ask me. You can look up the video. He was very, very confused. And so we had a discussion, and finally I said, what's preventing you from going and living right now like the Amish live? I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Why are you telling me how to live my life? And he said, well, you shouldn't be allowed to own more than one house or one car. I said, that in its essence is exactly why your philosophy is evil, morally corrupt, and has failed. It's because you're telling me what I should not be able to do. If you believe that living in a commune is a great idea, if you believe that pooling your resources is really, really effective, then go live in northern Vermont. They have a lot of those those off-the-grid type living experiments. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Don't tell me how to live mine. And that's what I think makes our viewpoint and our philosophy so intellectually consistent, is that we're not going to take money away from you. We're not going to tell you how to live your individual capacity as long as it doesn't harm someone else. And so it brings me to another point, which I mentioned. Socialism is an extremely dangerous political philosophy with over 100 million people dead in the last 100 years. You look at not just the modern socialist failures of today, Cuba, Venezuela, Argentina, which is a more moderate example, Brazil, which embraced failed socialist experiments. You look at even the more mild experiments of France, which is bankrupt, in Spain, which is bankrupt, in Portugal, which is bankrupt, in Greece, which is bankrupt, in Italy, which is bankrupt. I can go on and on and on, where their debt to GDP ratio is upwards of 180% of GDP, and their unemployment is skyrocketing. The problem with socialism, as Maggie Thatcher said, is eventually you run out of other people's money. Is you need the capacity to be able to create wealth, to take risk in the marketplace, and if you're going to try to redistribute it, you're eventually going to run out of that said wealth. Now, there is a growing socialist movement in this country, admittedly, to the comrades out there. Bernie Sanders has been very successful about it. The problem is, again, is that those that profess socialism, henceforth Bernie Sanders, some of the biggest hypocrites you could possibly imagine. Here's a guy saying, the millionaires and billionaires are ruining our society. Meanwhile, he has 3 houses. He's a multi-millionaire. His wife earned a $600,000 a year salary, teaching a failed college that went bankrupt. If he was such a good socialist, why doesn't he give away 95% of his money to the government each year? If he believed that giving more money to the government meant more people would live better lives, then why doesn't he lead by example? I lead by example. I'm a proud capitalist. I do everything I possibly can to grow the organization that I'm passionate about and try to expand my sphere of influence where I see fit. And this comes to the fundamental issue of what we, conservative, libertarian, freedom lovers and those people that embrace socialism and those people on the left, is that we will be intellectually consistent and not tell you to make the choices that you want for your own life. In fact, we believe in the power of the individual. We believe that there's incredible untapped potential in this country and across the world, that when people are actually empowered and given the proper reinforcement and capacity to take risks and pursue their dreams they see fit, absolutely incredible things can happen. And we'll say, we argue that socialism crushes those dreams. Which goes to the next point, is actually more domestically, which is the war on poverty has been a cataclysmic failure, wasting incredible amounts of money, shattering dreams, and crushing communities. If you look at, since the Great Society, which was passed by Lyndon Baines Johnson in the mid-1960s, here in this country we have spent trillions of dollars trying to stem domestic poverty unsuccessfully in this country. Starting in the 1960s, we started with the Housing and Urban Development. We started with the Department of Health and Human Services. We started with huge welfare programs. We started with government-sponsored housing projects, and we have seen poverty increase in these communities. We have seen homelessness increase. We have seen crime increase. When you start to spend trillions of dollars a year on a problem and you don't see it get any better, that's when you should take a step backwards and say maybe we're not doing the right thing to solve and address that problem. We conservatives believe that the public sector education system that protects bad teachers, essentially protects the public sector teacher unions, is a moral and cataclysmic failure. I come from Chicago. I can speak to how terrible the public sector teacher unions have been to allowing poor students to have equal opportunity or at least a competitive shot. When you have 18% of graduating high school students in the south side of Chicago that can read at a 4th grade level, yet teachers are not allowed to get fired and they get pay raises every year, there's something fundamentally wrong about that. And that is part of the expansion of the state and government-protected teacher unions. War on poverty has been a cataclysmic failure. You look at the trillions of dollars that we have spent in our inner cities, I always find a wonderful, very interesting correlation. The most screwed up cities with the highest crime, highest homelessness, with the highest level of despair are without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, been run by Democrats over the last 50 years. Philadelphia, Oakland, Milwaukee, Detroit have been run by people that embrace these bigger government anti-freedom measures that unfortunately have kept people poor for a very, very long time. My final point, and then I'd love to open up for some questions and have some dialogue. It's a little bit of a sidestep. I might get some agreement here. I rail against the higher education system. Like I said, I decided to not go to college. Worked out fine for me. But I have been a harsh critic of what I believe all of you are experiencing. I believe you guys are all getting ripped off. I believe college should be 3 years instead of 4 years. The government-run student loan industry has been a total failure and stealing all of your money, and you guys have little to no choice about it. In essence, you look at most Western countries, you look at Germany, you look at all these, most European countries, they're able to do college in 3 years, not 4. I'll ask a question. How many of you were forced to take a class that you felt wasted your time and money? Yeah, of course, every hand goes up. And that had no relevancy to your major, right? That had actually no application at all. Now, why is that? Well, that's because this university wants to maximize your time here and try to get as much unnecessary money withdrawn out of you as possible. You, as a student, should be the customer in charge. You should be in the bargaining position, and in a market which doesn't exist, you should have the negotiation to say, no, I do not have to study North American migratory bird studies in order to become an engineer, right? I do not have to study the history of the Ethiopian conquest of Eastern Africa, which might be a very important thing if that's what you want to study. Do not impose the soft social science classes that are very expensive, that are time consuming. And if you look at it, time is money. The more time you spend on campus, the more meals you have to buy, the more rent you have to pay, the more time you're not out in the workplace. I champion, and I think everyone should, to move college to 3 years and have it more about career preparation and not ideological or life exploration. You look at why tuition continues to rise. We have trillions of dollars over the last couple decades that come into the Department of Education that heavily subsidize the student loan industry. Colleges have no incentive to cut costs at all because all of you are able to pay in full or drop out. There's almost no in the middle because I'm discussing all of you have to fill out FAFSA to get into school, right? That's the Federal Student Loan Agency, and as soon as you finish it, you're solicited with all these wonderful opportunities to fill out these low interest loans to be able to make this unaffordable college tuition price tag attainable. It used to be, here's how it used to be when you applied to go to college. You used to have to go to a community banker, justify to them why you were going to go to the school, and then they may or may not give you that loan. Some people made the argument, well, that's preventing people from going to college. Fair enough. I'll make the argument we have too many people going to college today. The national graduation rate is 59% at some of our best universities here in the Big Ten. I won't mention any names, but there's one across the river. They have over 30% of incoming freshmen that will not graduate within 2 years. How many of you know someone that dropped out? I'm sure you know 5, 10, 15, or maybe even 20 from your high school. I knew so many. Four-year college is not for everyone. I think we need more entrepreneurs, more plumbers, more electricians, more carpenters. In fact, I know this because I'm not a recipient of a college degree. We have a stigma in our society that look as people that did not go to four-year college as not as intelligent, not as informed, and not as equipped to be able to be successful. Now that might be very true in a lot of fields, but I can tell you that just because you're able to get a degree in a certain sector does not always make you more prepared in that particular job or field. If you're going to be an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor, very, very important to get accredited. Most people go to college, unfortunately, as many of you know, for the opposite reason, which is I'm going to figure it out along the way. No problem with that necessarily. The problem is when nearly 40% of them end up dropping out. Then they're left with student loan debt, they're stuck in this horrible middle position, and they end up going back to community college. They feel less confident about themselves and not as prepared to be able to make a life for themselves that's productive. And most of this is because the federal government's intrusion into the student loan industry. We have anything but a market because all of you are required to fill out FAFSA. 99% of all student loans are given out by the federal government. All this cheap money comes into the college, and these colleges, like Minnesota, I know it's a state-run school, so it's a little bit different, but still they say, why do we have to cut costs? Why do we have to lower our tuition? We have a record amount of people applying. They're paying in full. So who cares if the graduation rate's a little bit shaky? We're able to get. There's no recourse if we don't graduate. We don't graduate them in high numbers. So I'm a big proponent of that. I think student loan debt's a tremendous problem in this country. It's going to be one of the biggest barriers to our generation's success. There is more privately held student loan debt than there is privately held credit card debt in this country, over $1.4 trillion. I play a game at most colleges I go to where I ask who has the biggest student loan debt, and hands will raise. And, I've heard $180,000, $190,000 in student loan debt, completely unsustainable levels, and sometimes they can't tell me why. We ask our high school seniors, we say, where are you going to college, not why are you going to college? I know I asked that question. How many of you got asked that question? Probably everyone. There's almost an expectation to go to four-year college or universities. I don't believe that should be the case. I don't believe we should continue to advance a culture that makes it seem like you're less equipped, intelligent, or educated just because you didn't get a four-year degree. So with that, I'd love to open up for questions. Do we have a mic at some point? If not, I can keep talking. I've got topics. We've got the little mic there. Thank you. So I'm going to do a Marco Rubio. We'll get to the Bolsheviks in a second. Go to the back first.
Oh yeah. Thanks for coming. Especially thank you for pointing out the deaths that happened under communism. My family fled the Soviet Union for not being ethnically Russian. It's nice for people to actually realize that. For a more pragmatic approach, was your conservatarian solution to the healthcare insurance problem, where people are just going in debt for getting hurt and sick, and
Sure.
That's not doing good stuff for our economy?
Huge issue. So it's important. So we had a huge healthcare overhaul in 2009, 2010, passed by Obama and the Democrats. It was a total disaster. But here's the problem. is equating health insurance with health care. So the delivery of health care in this country is actually a very high standard. The problem is most people can't afford or access that standard of care, right? So just looking at history and looking at the last 60, 70 years of proven market forces, how do we get a price down, more people to access something, and quality to go up? Well, you allow a market to exist, right? So we have anything but a market force in a lot of different, in healthcare in particular. So I can give one example after the other. In health insurance in particular, you're here in Minneapolis right now, you are legally, it's a federal crime for you to buy health insurance in Wisconsin right now. That's not a market. A company in Wisconsin might be actually able to insure you a lot cheaper and better than a company here in Minnesota. So allowing health insurance to be bought across state lines. Not everyone should see a doctor for every single ailment. One of the big problems, the pharmaceutical companies are able to go into Congress and list all these different sorts of diseases and ailments that need doctor signatures. What do I mean? A common cold, you should be able to go into Walgreens or CVS to be able to see someone at a lower level practitioner. That's starting to happen. That deregulation is finally starting to happen in a lot of states. But over 95% of emergency room visits are broken bones, common cold, misdiagnosed influenza, things that can be treated by someone that is not a specialty doctor. In fact, that will liberate doctors to be able to focus more on the highly sophisticated diseases and ailments that need their time and their attention. Finally, if you look at one example of something that procedure I'm going to get very soon, of something that was completely unregulated by the insurance agency, unregulated by government, but it still has to do with healthcare. 3.5, 4 years ago, it used to cost $10,000 per eye for LASIK surgery because of all the new competition that came into LASIK, and the insurance companies refused to cover it because it was considered a cosmetic improvement, not a medical procedure. You now can get high-level LASIK surgery for $500 an eye. That's pretty amazing. You look at the price that went down, the quality went up. Now you might say, Charlie, that's a horrible example. What could be possibly more important than your eyes? I mean, it's not like people are just handing over money and, oh, I hope he gets it right. I mean, these are credible doctors that are able to do this procedure and have brought the cost down. It's because the insurance companies were completely removed from it. I will agree with many of my Democratic counterparts. We have a very corrupt health system where the insurance companies write the legislation, they write the reimbursement policies, and they're able to just operate directly. When you go to a hospital, you rarely ask the person that's carting you into the hospital room, like, how much does this cost? How much does this cost, right? You're rarely itemizing your time spent there. Because of that, they're able to jack up the price, and the health insurance companies are right there in cahoots with them, especially when it comes to Medicaid reimbursement. Long answer short, we don't have a market right now. History has shown us, especially over the last 50, 60 years, in every sector, in communication, in technology, in food, in everything, when you allow a market to exist, your prices go down, quality go up, and access be able to be spread further. So, long-winded answer to a very good question. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I just want to let you know you're my hero. I just had a question. Do you think the rise of atheism has contributed to a lot of the rise of socialists and communists?
Great question, my friend. So those of you that know me and know me well, I'm a pretty harsh critic against atheism. Not against agnosticism. I understand that. I had never been there, but the atheism, which is like the certainty of knowing that there is no God, and at times the pompous delivery of which that is put forth. I am so correct that there is no God. I'm going to tell everyone else about it. But my always answer is, if there really is no God and you care so much, then why do you even talk about it, right? Like, what does this all matter? It's kind of a facetious answer. The answer is yes. As the atheist movement continues to grow in this country, it's a direct corollary with the desire to try to have government or the state replace what the church or what government should really exist to do. Your example of the USSR and your family that had to flee, your family will tell you the USSR was a godless society that they created. They made government their god. You look at China, you look at Cuba, you look at a lot of these countries, they try to stamp out any sort of organized religion or belief in God, because as soon as you can get rid of people's belief in God, then government and the ruler becomes the most important thing. So I am troubled by the rise of atheism in this country, more on a spiritual level and less on a political level, but from a very precise political perspective, if you look at the successful communist socialist movements the last 100 years, they wiped out religion very quickly, and then they were able to make their rise successful after that. And it comes down to this final belief. Where do you believe your rights come from? Do you believe that they come from a higher being? Or maybe you're not sure, but you're positive they don't come from government? That might be the agnostic answer. Or do you believe that it's the state's responsibility, government's responsibility to give you your rights, and you sign over your life upon birth that you're part of this broader social contract, and that everything that you do is tied to them? I would argue for the opposite, and I think the rise of atheism in this country is troubling, and not necessarily the agnostic thing I get, but it's the certainty that you know that there's absolutely no God. I find that befuddling intellectually, to be honest with you. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
So my question was, in the context of the free market, we saw that we had major tax cuts on Thursday or Friday, I think it was. And in the context of age, right, in a global society, Trump was kind of a nationalistic candidate where he pushed for a more competitive market, saying the U.S. in competition with this globalized market, we needed to have more tax cuts for our corporations. So could you speak to that in terms of how, say, Burger King has to go to Canada of all places so they can get lower tax rates compared to the U.S. and why that's important?
First of all, I love the hat. It's awesome. So good. Thank you. So great question. So we saw big tax reform last week. It's not a perfect bill. I'd give it like a 6.5 out of 10, but it's a lot better than 0 out of 10. Not everyone's taxes are going to go down. Some people's taxes will go up, mostly higher income earners in Democrat states. But I know a lot of people's taxes are going to go down. So I was really pleased to see it pass. So one little misunderstanding of what President Trump ran on is he did not necessarily run on an anti-trade platform. So part of what he talked about and what he has done is free trade, which I'm a huge advocate of. I'm a disciple of Milton Friedman's free trade philosophy. It's not just being able to sell what you want to sell, but you also have to be able to buy what you want to buy. But if a country refuses you to sell those goods and services in a country, then you have to renegotiate them. So a great point is the president has been a harsh critic of China, as you know. He made it a big part of his campaign. And part of that is included where he went to China a couple months ago, and he went there a couple weeks ago, and he renegotiated the ability for America to sell grass-fed beef in China. That might seem like a little insignificant thing, but it was an embargo. China said you are not allowed to sell American grass-fed beef. It's been there for 30 years. Now, that's a $40 billion a year industry here in this country that he opened up. So this idea that a lot of people say he's anti-trade, not necessarily. He wants to advocate for our benefit so we can also sell our stuff, right? So that we can sell some of our greatest American assets, which is coal, which is American-fed beef, which is, things that we're able to make at a competitive advantage, which other presidents failed to renegotiate in both parties. So the final point is, finally we're going to see, fingers crossed, our tax rates become much more competitive. We have the highest corporate tax rate in the world, not the highest effective corporate tax rate in the world, but it's 39% on paper. Few companies, if a company is paying that, they got a horrible accountant, let me just put it that way. Few companies pay it, but it should come down to 20%, which will result inevitably in repatriation and hopefully re-domiciling of countries back to this country away from the tax sheltering that's been going on. I for one know at least 10 businesses and entrepreneurs that are pledging to bring resources back to this country, thanks to a lot of the alleviated tax brackets that have happened with the recent bill on the corporate side, the personal side, and other discussions as well. Thank you. All right, let's have a discussion here. So.
Yeah, I'm with the International Marxist Tendency, and I said to
slow down. International
Marxist Tendency.
What do you mean by tendency? Just like
a current or like a movement.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, I just wanted to ask 2 pointed questions. One was our comrades in St. Louis. We had organized a debate with you, which you backed out of.
I did not. That's not true.
No, this is true. Well,
no, it's not. I've debated Marxists all across the country.
It was the college Republicans at the University of it was the Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
You mean we rescheduled it? I've debated
no,
many of you guys mercilessly.
They didn't reschedule it. They said you stopped replying to them, and that they couldn't get you to the table. The Republican.
You want to debate now? I'm happy to.
No, I don't. I would love to schedule a debate, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to talk about your failed ideology. 100 million people have killed, and the lives it shattered, and the dreams that it's brought to the country. Well, I am the speaker, but go ahead.
But I'm now the individual speaker.
You're asking a question.
Yes.
You're a questioner and attendee, not a speaker. But go ahead.
Well, they said all individual speakers, so I thought that was plural, but maybe I was wrong. Anyway, the other question I have is, I know some, actually, I guess just in response to what you said there. Yeah, I am appreciative of the reference to the 100 million dead. I just want to point out, like the first people, that's actually an exaggerated figure used by the Black Book. But communism, that's not the point though. Anyone dead is bad. And the first people who were killed was our tendency, were the Bolsheviks. They were the first ones, the Trotskyists, the first ones who were killed in camps. And that is the blood, our blood, that you are, exploiting when you attack us. But
Lenin killed over 2 million people as well.
that's completely untrue.
So the
There was a
grades,
war. There
so
was
the
a
grades
civil
they
war.
found
There
were
was a
just
civil
like
war.
conspiracy theories, or
There was a civil war, and people died in the midst of the civil war.
right?
That's
So
true.
when he brutally went to the villages and cut people's heads off, that was like a mistake, or what? A misrepresentation?
Yeah,
Or when he intentionally famished the entire southern region of Crimea because he didn't believe they were ethnically pure enough to be Russian? Was that like not part of the Marxist worldview?
No, and I
No,
don't.
please comment on the intentional famishing of southern Russia because he did not believe they were ethnically pure Russians.
Lenin was the person who most advanced the rights of.
Well, because he killed people strategically. No, he didn't. You know.
I mean, well, strategically in war, yes. More people died in proportionally in the American Civil War, and we don't question why that was wrong.
No, we do question it actually.
You don't question why it was.
We do question Sherman's March, and we do question the atrocities of the American Civil War. I wish you communists would actually turn your back on your horrendous, murderous history.
No, I'm glad we freed all the black people in the South. I'm glad.
The communists freed the black people in the South.
Some of them, yeah.
So before Marx even wrote his famous manifesto, you were
No, this was after the manifesto. This was 20 years after. Marx was a correspondence with Lincoln.
Well,
But this is not the point. This is not the point I'm trying to get. I
Sure, go ahead.
don't really want to have a debate with you. I just wanted to correct some things. But
You've been
the exact-
unsuccessful thus far, but
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I didn't. Okay, but anyway, the question I wanted to ask was, I know some people are getting on in age, they're getting a little bit older. I wanted to ask, where does Turning Point USA get their diapers?
such as
Over like the Kent State protests, and I'm sure you also have to wear adult diapers.
everyone's laughing so much, dude. It's great.
Thank you.
It's great.
Thank you.
So, what was the point?
That was the point.
Really great.
Thank you.
So let's put you on the spot.
Okay.
How can you, with a straight face, embrace an ideology that has systematically destroyed nearly 3/4 of the world? Everywhere it's implemented, you see countries ruined, bankrupted, lives lost. Let me ask you another question. If the Soviet example was so great, why were people fleeing the Soviet Union for Western democracies, and they weren't fleeing Western democracies for the Soviet Union?
Yeah, I don't defend the generation of the Soviet Union. As I was pointing forward at the beginning, Lenin and Trotsky, they pointed out that the revolution wasn't international, that it was contained within a single nation,
It wasn't
especially in
contained.
backwards.
You tried it in
especially in backwards
Afghanistan,
nation.
you tried it in
This was
Ukraine,
after
you
the
tried it in
generation.
Lithuania,
This was after
you
the
tried it in
generation.
Latvia,
This
you
is
tried it in
Stalin's
Zimbabwe,
That's
you
Stalin.
tried it in Cuba,
That's
you
Stalin.
tried it in Central America,
I
you
didn't
tried it
try it.
all throughout the What are you talking about? You tried it on the Korean Peninsula, you tried it in Kyrgyzstan, you tried it in Pakistan, you tried it in China, you tried it in Vietnam, you tried it in Laos, you tried it in Cambodia,
It's very
you tried it in
impressive.
Indochina.
I'm stunned.
What do you mean
I've never
you're
heard this
saying?
argument before in my entire life.
Well, they didn't try communism in Vietnam. They didn't try communism in the Korean Peninsula. They
That
didn't
was
try.
Stalinism. That was, they imposed this
Stalinism is communism,
No, it's
and it
not.
was
This
Marxism.
is a very simplistic.
So you're part of the international Marxist tendency,
Yes.
and you will not stand by Stalin,
No.
who
Because
famously
he-
had a
he
picture
killed
of Marx
Trotsky.
in
Yeah,
his
because
chamber.
Yeah, he's a zealot. He's.
So what would you call every leader in North Korea, or ever, just like
Yeah,
they
Stalin.
misunderstood it? Maybe you communists should realize that everyone who tries your ideology ends up with most people dead that disagree with them.
So the one time I would say we had a successful revolution was in October in 1917.
You mean the Paris Commune?
In the Paris Commune.
And how long
And the
did that
Paris
last?
Commune.
Like 2.5 weeks?
So
So people
no,
wanted to go.
1917 was Russia, not the Paris Commune.
So it
that
like-
was another example.
So it lasted how
It was
long?
it was destroyed in blood by the capitalists. They murdered all the workers.
Well, capitalist is a rough connection to people that were definitely not capitalists because
Why
you
were they
saw.
not capitalists?
I'm sorry?
Why were they not capitalists?
Because they
You don't think
didn't
France was
believe in
capitalist
free
in
enterprise.
1871?
No, they were fascists.
No, fascism didn't exist in 1871.
Oh, fascism didn't exist when Le Pen read his book.
I don't know when that.
Oh, you don't take too much.
He's not. Fascism as an ideology was formed in the.
What about Rome?
So you're,
But
so,
but
so
this
just,
is
just to summarize,
the point.
I would like one final question.
You keep moving on from the point.
No, I'm actually going back to the core point.
Okay, good.
Can you tell me one place where your idea works today?
I mean, it's not been implemented at all today.
So, like,
again,
what does North Korea do wrong?
What? Sorry.
North Korea, how is it not a communist country?
It's a Stalinist degenerate worker state, or deformed worker state.
So what would be a country that's close to what you believe?
Venezuela.
Wow, that's working out great.
I was going to respond to the question of Venezuela.
4,000% inflation,
I was
they're
gonna
eating
respond to
dogs
that.
in the streets,
Venezuela is-
average
Venezuela
citizens
fundamentally
lost
is a
20
capitalist
pounds.
country.
I'm
Venezuela
sorry?
is a capitalist country.
America's mostly a capitalist country, it's going
It's
great.
entirely a capitalist country.
No, it's a
not going
mostly
great.
capitalist country. And I said America's the greatest country in the
Socialism
history
is
of the world.
workers' democratic control of means of production. It's when we, as
So,
workers, control
I'm
the
glad
places that we work.
so-
It's when we democratically control our own work.
Great, I'm glad you asked that. So
And-
you know there's over 5 million workers in America that own the companies they work for. Isn't that what you're advocating for?
On an international scale, yeah.
But they're internationally publicly traded companies, so it is on an international scale.
No, it's not organized. It's
Sure it is.
systemic and connected international. I mean, we can't just have workers controlling only their own industries.
So
Right?
you want-
If we only control what we directly are involved in producing,
Is anyone else
that
enjoying
would disproportionately.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Final question. Then I'd love to get to some other questions. But is there a reason why people flee Cuba from Miami, Florida, don't flee Miami, Florida for Cuba? Does that like concern you at all? That maybe that your ideas suck?
It's a Stalinist regime again.
Again, it's not.
That destroyed and they murdered the communists before they were able to conquer. They murdered the genuine revolutions. Lenin, Trotsky were murdered. The genuine Bolsheviks were all murdered. They were the first victims of the Stalinist reaction. The Stalinist reaction then imposed a new brutal and bloody system in Russia, and it was then replicated in many other countries around the world, and we do not defend that.
So-
We've never defended that. We were the
Well,
first victims,
so-
we always were fighting against it, while you apologize for it. While the conservatives, the
You
liberals
say
apologize for
the
it.
international Marxist tendency
Yes.
is a guy that had Karl Marx's picture at every single annual parade in the Soviet Union.
I'm sure you have Thatcher
A guy-
on your bed. That doesn't.
I really don't. I have Milton Friedman, who's a freedom lover, and Thomas Sowell, who's a freedom lover.
Supported the
and I have
dictatorship of Pinochet.
I have Bible verses.
So you supported the murder of. all
No,
the
actually, I
leftists
don't
in Chile?
support fascism.
Well,
I-
but
and I don't support
you're saying
socialism.
if Stalin
So
had liked
how did
Marx,
Milton
if
Friedman
Stalin-
support the dictatorship of Pinochet? He supported the free enterprise policies that were implemented throughout Central and South America. When he once voiced support of the dictatorship of Pinochet.
He vocally. I don't know the quote.
Well,
but
you don't
he
know it
vocally-
doesn't exist.
No, it does exist. Just Google it. Just Google Pinochet.
Yeah, you should use a capitalist
Google
free
it.
market company, Google, to try to prove my point. Thank you. Anyway, let's get to the other question. The other point of this, though, the final point, which is so amazing, is the communists and socialists, every time, without a shadow of a doubt, it doesn't work because it's never been tried right. It's never been tried right. With over 200 documented tried examples, they still are not able to put their name behind one of them. Yet we capitalists point to
Russian
unlimited
Revolution.
amounts of
That
examples.
was us.
The Russian Revolution, which ended up in Stalinism and 100 million people dead, and then Lenin, who systematically killed over 2 million people in the southern part of Russia and Crimea because they were not ethnically pure enough. My friend, I think, has a question. Thank you, my comrade, for showing up. We got lots of good material there. You will see it again. Thank you. Yeah.
My question was as far as like environmental regulation goes. Obviously, that's on governmental level through the EPA, and a little bit of the Trump administration has been kind of going back to EPA standards. How do you think the free market can control pollution and erosion of the environment around the world while still being free?
It's a great, very thoughtful question. Thank you. So it might come as a surprise, but the number one polluter in the world is actually the U.S. federal government. Through our military, through our government buildings, through our lack of treating pollution properly, it's actually mismanagement by the U.S. federal government. Now, part of that is because it's the biggest possible entity in the country, right? So inevitably, you're going to have a lot of pollution. But if you look at the Colorado River, many of you remember this, the horrible pollution and the toxic waste spill that happened a year and a half ago that got very little coverage. It was actually done by the EPA. Now, what do I feel about the rollback of those regulations? Very much in support of it. Now, I'm actually in a weird position because I consider myself an environmentalist. I'm an Eagle Scout. I don't like to see pollutions, right? With that being said, the best way to deter pollution and the best way to actually incentivize people to take care of their own lands and resources in the best way possible without polluting public access rivers, I believe is private property rights and free enterprise and actual advances that you see thanks to competition. So a great example is in countries such as Western industrialized countries, as productivity goes up and technology gets better, pollution rates inevitably go down, right? So in countries where they have not advanced as far to be able to have these diversified, sophisticated energy sources, I'm a big fan of nuclear. A lot of people are not fans of nuclear. It's a very, very clean energy source. A lot of environmentalists in the EPA do not think nuclear should exist. A lot of the fear about nuclear is actually originated in what happened in Japan with some of the nuclear spills recently. But you look at a country like France, which is outwardly socialist, they get 80% of all their power from nuclear. So, long-winded answer, roll back a lot of these environmental regulations that are designed to destroy certain industries, but it's important to note the number one polluter in the world is the U.S. federal government, and they can't necessarily take the moral high ground on this. They have massive mismanagement of resources, and they have a tremendous, I think, a tremendous guilt when it comes to actual pollution of the environment, which we should all be against, because that affects everyone. As I say, you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't harm someone else. If you're polluting a public access river, that's when you start, that's when you break the argument that you're harming someone else. Does that make sense? Thank you. Madison, you have another question?
Yeah.
You're just going to throw the mic? Yeah, go ahead.
So you talked about a lot of like hardline economic issues, so something that has a little bit more gray areas and sort of the light of like sexual harassment that has come out lately. Do you think that Republicans should be prepared to take a short-term political loss to sustain a longer-term moral victory?
So I have called for both Roy Moore and Al Franken to get the hell out of their job. So I mean, I think they should. But neither party has any sort of moral high ground anymore. They have lost complete and all capacity to talk with these issues on any authority, right? And so the Democrat Party, which is the party of women's rights, I'll tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if Al Franken had an R in front of his name and that stuff came out, you would see Nancy Pelosi out the next hour. This molester must get out of the U.S. Now she's talking about like therapy and giving them forgiveness, which the Republicans are no better, mind you. I'm not trying to say it. We have the same sort of hypocrisy. I would like to see a complete and total denunciation of that sort of behavior. I think child molestation should be a line. I don't live in Alabama, so I have no say in that. But yeah, I think that there has to be a price to pay for this sort of behavior. Kevin Spacey, Bill O'Reilly, Charlie Rose, Harvey Weinstein, Mark Halperin, Louis C.K. They all had ramifications. Right, they all had ramifications for the behavior. Don't see the same necessarily for politicians. You just had the first politician resign, Conyers, finally, because he did some horrible things that he covered up with taxpayer money. So, but I have a prediction. Franken is not going anywhere, I'm telling you. The only way Franken will not be a U.S. Senator is if you beat him when he runs for re-election here in the state. You better be, in other words. You got it. So, good question. Thank you. The hat. Thank you. And then we'll get here. Yeah.
So, obviously, recently there was a tax reform going through. A lot of liberals are against that with the estimated $2.5 trillion deficit coming in from that. I know the chief economic advisor commented believing that basically the spending from individuals and firms is going to help the economy grow itself out of that deficit. Can you comment on your opinion on that?
Huge opponent of deficits. I will say this though. I mean, I built our original organization fighting against deficits. So just because we cut a bunch of taxes doesn't mean we can't go to the next week and then cut a bunch of spending, right? Which it's like they're acting it goes either or. Like, well, we got to cut a bunch of taxes or else it's not going to work. Number one, I would love to see an even more dramatic tax cut and like 80% of federal spending disappear. I think like 80% of it's wasteful or inefficient or better used to the states, right? So I'm a big proponent of bringing more money back to people's pockets, alleviating the corporate burden. That's why I love the tax cut. Do I love the deficits? No, but now the budget's up, believe it or not. We have 2 weeks to come together a budget. The Republicans had a backbone. They'd say, all right, for all you deficit hawks, let's play game. All you Democrats are going and complaining about how it's going to add $1.5 trillion to deficit over 10 years, mind you. That's $150 billion a year over 10 years. The deficit is an annualized figure, so they made it seem like we're at $1.5 trillion shortfall, even beyond this. Not true. Okay, that's just Washington giving. So why can't they have dramatic spending cuts? Finally, all these Democrats, right, that signed these budgets and voted for these bills under Obama, where they saw the national debt go from 10 trillion to 20 trillion, where their economists were going on cable news saying that deficit spending is a wonderful thing, it's going to stimulate the economy, that we don't have to worry about debts and deficits. Every single one of them now on cable news in the last 2 weeks have said, oh my goodness, the debt is going to ruin us, it's because of these horrible... You just oversaw the biggest national debt increase from 10 trillion to 20 trillion in the last 8 years, and you said nothing. In fact, you told us it was a good thing. And now we're trying to return more money back to people's pockets. We recognize deficits aren't good. We're willing to do spending cuts, and you're telling us this is the worst thing. It's like the political hypocrisy is unbelievable. So thank you for the question. No, I think we should do massive spending cuts, get to a balanced budget amendment. I don't think Congress should be paid unless they pass a balanced budget. Yeah. See them really start to work as hard as we do. So,
Wait, let's go over here. If you don't have any.
yeah, I'm sorry. Sure.
Okay.
So with the 2016 election, you saw a very stark split between the rural and the urban areas in terms of ideology and where they voted. What would you say is the origin for that split?
Great question. So President Trump, to his credit, played to a lot of the apprehension and really, I would say, just how many rural areas in this country were overlooked. Trump almost won Minnesota, as many of you know. I mean, it was very close. And it was a surprise, and it was consistent with kind of a heartland theme. And there's nothing, and here's where I really push back against a lot of the critics of the president. They say, well, a lot of President Trump's support was built on white racial nationalism. And I could not disagree more, and I see you shaking your head. I traveled the country for 4 months on a personal capacity with Donald Trump Jr., talking to voters, talking to people, and really diving into it. Not once did I hear that they were going to go vote for Donald Trump because of some sort of deep-seated racial hatred against another group, or that they felt that white people were being left behind. Do those people exist? I'm sure they found them for some CNN documentary, right? I'm positive they're out there somewhere, right? The point being is many people felt that DC coastal elite politicians that went to massive fundraisers, that went on the late-night shows and flew around in private jets, looked down, literally, from their jets, down upon middle America, and their values were not being represented. And here came this blustery billionaire that talked in a way that was totally unconventional, and talked like Uncle Hank at the diner on Saturday after Thanksgiving, right? And people said, blow it up. This guy is gonna blow it up. Seriously, we're gonna give you the keys to the kingdom. I want you to walk in and press detonate. That's what a lot of people felt, because there was so much righteous indignation in this country that the DC elites misunderstood or totally mispredicted, totally unpredictable. And I'm part of that kind of anger. Like, I want them to do more. I want them to fire more people and have more disruption, because DC is more than a swamp. It's like a jacuzzi for the most unethical, lying, backstabbing people you could possibly... Like, here in America and Minnesota, we have values. Like, they don't. It's incredible. And so, you know what? A lot of people in Iowa and even Minnesota and Wisconsin said, who's the craziest bunch? That guy. Go blow it up. Like, seriously. And that's part of what happened. Not to mention, Hillary Clinton might have been the worst presidential candidate in the history of politics. Like, the worst. Some people here might think she's a wonderful person and all that. Wow. But to say that she was a good candidate, she got outworked, she got out-hustled, she got out-messaged. She did not even visit Wisconsin and Michigan. I love this. She said, oh, it's because of Russia and misogyny that I lost the election. Did misogyny or Russia force you not to go to Wisconsin or Michigan the last 4 months of the campaign? Like, was there some sort of Russian air block that prevented you from visiting the state of Wisconsin to campaign? She didn't visit. She didn't visit these states that she lost, and then they wonder, oh, I wonder why the rural voter in Wisconsin didn't show up for a Democrat for the 45th year in a row. Because you don't even go and give them some love. Right, so you've got to give the president credit. He outworked her. He did 5-to-1 more public appearances and rallies, 15-to-1 more interviews. He did more. I mean, he just made himself more available because he loved, the attention. He loved the publicity. And so you had a mixture of a fired-up base, a misrepresented middle America, and probably and arguably the worst candidate that you could possibly put up for office. Someone who's so uninspiring, who has so much baggage. When Hillary Clinton landed in Ohio, she landed and then she had a whole other plane for her baggage. I mean, this woman was the most corrupt individual that I could possibly imagine. And it's like, what scandal do you not want to vote her for? Like, we have a whole room full of them. It's like, take your pick. Then you had a guy that had really, it's like, oh yeah, I baggage, so what? I've had a fun life. I essentially answered anything she has lawyers talking and everything. They're like, that's exactly what I don't want. Blow it up! And that's exactly what I do. So, great question. Yeah.
Hi. First off, thanks for visiting. Thank you so much. But my question was, so to start off, one of my favorite quotes that you always say, like zip codes should determine a child's future. One of my favorites, honestly. So my question was, so since property taxes, like they help fund schools and stuff, how is it the kids that live in poverty, how are they promised a successful future if they go to like those rundown schools and stuff like that?
It's a great question, thank you. So her question, if everyone couldn't hear it, was talking about how we actually fund our schools. And the way we fund our schools is different state by state. Now, I'm guessing in Minnesota, it's mostly property taxes, some sort of state commitment. Here's the problem. The funding is an issue with schools, but it's more than a fund. It's the funding issue is actually, I'd say, the fourth or fifth problem. The problem is access to actually better education. I'm a big proponent of school choice and actual opportunity scholarships, allowing students in lower income neighborhoods to be able to say, have their parent pull a trigger, it's called a parent trigger, and say, my student, my kid is in a horrible failing school, why can't they go to this magnet school, this charter school, or this private school? I could send my tax dollars with them. Now, it's not as cut and dry and simple as that. There's a lot of success stories of school choice, and there's some failures. There's some schools that haven't worked out great. I know personally hundreds of students that I've met that have been benefited from being able to go to a different through school choice. The problem is you have the Democratic Party and the liberals that are so bought by the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, which are the two largest teacher unions in the country, that are completely against school choice, and they're completely against the most important component in a child's education. It's not funding, it's not even location. The most important thing that you can give a student is a good teacher. It's the number, and of course all those things matter. It matters that if they can, they can't eat, they can't focus, all those things matter, I'm not discounting that. But the quality of the teacher is the most important thing. So how do we create a culture where we reward our best teachers, we fire the worst, and we have our best teachers go to the worst schools? Well, public sector teacher unions are really getting in the way of that. They protect these teachers through teacher tenure laws, through being able to not fire bad teachers, and also paying all the teachers the same. I asked the question, how many get a high school teacher that probably should have been fired? I can name about 15 of them immediately, right? Immediately. How many of you had a really good high school teacher that should have made more money? Probably all your hands up go as well. The question is, how do you actually come to that conclusion to grade them? I think you have to have a comprehensive platform where you have teachers grading teachers and you have parent input. But inevitably, just basic logic is at least 10% of high school teachers in urban areas probably should not be teaching, right? So how do we encourage the pay scale to get higher? So if you get rid of those 10% of teachers and you're giving bonuses and raises to the best teachers, that's a great thing. And this is not a position that used to be uncommon. President Obama, when he was running for office in 2008, he famously said, good teachers should get pay raises and bad teachers should be fired. And it was like a big part of his campaign. And now we say that, we're considered to be anti-student. So to answer your question, the zip code should not determine a child's future. And that we should be very in support of school choice, which is a market solution to a government-created problem. You have a question right there, my friend.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about tax overhaul, right, and morality, which I really don't like.
He's good.
One of the issues that I think, me personally, that I think our generation is facing is how we take care of our elderly. What are your thoughts on the ideal solution for failing Social Security?
Yeah. So what's the best way to take care of elderly and poor people? I would say what doesn't work. Social Security, for our generation, is bankrupt, the first thing. I would make a very clear and compelling argument that if senior citizens, when they were much younger, were allowed to keep the money that was forcibly taken from them into the Social Security trust fund that doesn't exist, and they're able to invest it as they saw fit, they would be in a better financial situation when they got to 60 or 70 or 80 than the government forcibly taking that money away. Now, I know I have a 96-year-old grandmother in a retirement home. I get it. But her Social Security check, I laugh with her. I say, you're 96 and you're getting $700 a month. And I totaled up what it would have been when she stopped working when it was 78. She would have put just $50 a month in a very conservative, 4.5%, money managed fund. She would be spitting out checks that were $1,200 a month, right? And so I'm not saying that would be a perfect solution for everyone, but it comes down to freedom, right? Are we going to trust people with their own money, or is it government's responsibility to forcibly take money from your paycheck when you're 28, so that when you're 82 in a world that looks a lot different than the one we're living in, then you'll get taken care of. I don't agree with that. How do you best take care of elderly? Just my answer is always the same. How you best take care of the least of these is not necessarily through government programs. It's charities, it's communities, it's people helping people. I will make an argument that the Catholic Church will do a lot better job of helping poor people than the local government welfare commission, right? I will make that argument every day. And I believe that religious faith-based institutions, the Red Cross, the thousands of charities that I'm sure here in Minneapolis with very good social justice directed people, they do more with the money and the resources that they're granted. They're more frugal. And government, on the other hand, you look at the VA, the Veterans Administration, how we take care of our vets. You know, almost 60% of all the money that goes to the VA goes to administrative overhead. And that doesn't even go directly to the vets. A solution that Milton Friedman advocated for is you get rid of all these government bureaucracies, you get rid of the welfare agency and all this stuff, and you just give poor people a check every year and say, spend it however you want. It would save a tremendous amount of money. It would save hundreds of billions of dollars a year because you'd get rid of all this compliance stuff of people that just push papers all day long. And it's called the negative income tax, and then they can spend the money however they want. So I think my solution, as always, is maximize human freedom. Good things happen when you trust people to make decisions on their own. They're not always going to make the right choices, but that's part of what individual responsibility is. It has great advantages, and then consequences as well. The best way to help elderly people, private charities, people helping people. So, thank you for the question. A couple more?
Yeah, let's do one more question.
Hasn't asked. Does anyone else have a question they really want to ask? Thanks. Yeah.
Hello. I have a question. This might seem like sort of non sequitur, but I'm from very little city, from Seattle, and I sort of connected this to your question earlier about religion and its relation to socialism. I know many Christians from Seattle who, oddly enough, are very hardcore socialists, and frequently what they would cite to is they would look at the way Jesus and his followers lived, and they would say that,
Love this question. I get it. I love this question.
they would say that setup was more closer to Marxism. And I'm not in support of this position.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not going
But
to.
it's just,
I'm not going to roast you, dude. Don't worry. Like, it's good.
yeah, I just saw you roast that guy earlier, so I'm a little nervous.
No, you're good, bud.
Yeah. But yeah, I just feel as if that's sort of a good talking point they have. And so you're a religious person, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been developed Christian.
So in regards to that point they're making about the way Jesus and his followers lived, which they claim to be more of a collectivist, Marxist type society, how would you respond to that?
Great question. Thank you. So for those people in the room that are not interested at all in Jesus Christ, just the next 5 minutes, you can tune it out. If this is of interest to you and you've heard this argument before, I'm going to try to break it down the best I can. I actually have a whole speech that I gave at Grand Canyon University of why Jesus is not a socialist and the scripture and all this. I'm going to do the best to kind of recap it the quickest way I possibly can. So first of all, for those people that dare use Jesus as a political reference for their ideology, we as Christians believe that Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world. He did not run for king, he did not run for Pilate, he did not run for political office. In fact, he was quite agnostic, he was apathetic towards politics. If Jesus Christ wanted a specific governmental structure, he would have advocated for it. You can peruse the 4 Gospels, you can peruse the letters of Paul. He did not argue for a specific governmental structure, not once in any of the quotations that we have. Not with the later writings of Josephus, not anyone that ever wrote about the life of Jesus Christ. That's first and foremost. Second of all, he was rather preoccupied on actually the most important part of his, as we Christians believe, his visit to earth, was he was extremely worried about the salvation of the individual, person by personal salvation to actually get to heaven, that we as people, as we individually are broken, and that we need the blood and perfect sacrifice of Jesus Christ to be able to create that new covenant to be able to get to heaven. So he talked about what individuals can do to help poverty, what individuals can do to be able to improve their own life. Not once in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John does it say, my fellow brethren, form a collective, make sure it has equal democratic representation, and then move into Nazareth, and then you're going to be able to solve the problems of all the individuals. Instead, he told the story of the Good Samaritan, where the Samaritan was like a racial slur back then. It was like, how dare you even talk about helping a Samaritan? And he talked about an individual that rose above government-induced and government-reinforced standards, and he helped that person on the side of the road. I also talked a lot about, if you look at Jesus Christ individually and actually how he talked against the state, he was actually someone that was killed by the state, mind you. He was someone that was a victim of the state. He was not someone that would want government to, I think, to get too much power. His demise, if you will, was at the hands of a totalitarian government. The Pharisees were a quasi-governmental alliance institution with the Roman Empire. The famous Pontius Pilate, who sentenced Jesus Christ to death, was part of the uproaring mob, the uproaring Jewish mob that wanted to see him, gone. Now, if you look at the pure tenets of democratic socialism and of collectivism, majority rules. There is no objective truth. There is no constitutional laws. So under their own standard bearing, if this person deserves to die because everyone gets so excited and they yell about it, well, then so be it, right? He must have committed a crime. There was no due process. There was no Fifth Amendment. There was no equal representation. Point being is that a constitutional type republic, and one that actually limits government, I think is actually most consistent with the Judeo-Christian worldview articulated in the Bible, not just in the life of Jesus Christ in the four Gospels or the letters of Paul, but also throughout Proverbs, and you look at, it talks about the consequences of not working and not producing. The final point is you look at the one economically attributable parable, but also spiritually attributed parable of Jesus Christ, the only parable that we have that deals at all with how the individual should deal with production and being able to have output, is the parable of the talents. Now, I'm just really diving in the weeds, so if any of you don't care, I apologize, I'm almost done. But essentially, Jesus tells a story about three servants that work under a master. The master gives $1, $2, $3. It's not a dollar, it's a different currency, but for argument's sake, to say $1, $2, $3. The guy with $1 hides the dollar and does nothing with it. The guy with $2 reinvests it a little bit and makes a little bit of money. The guy with $3 doubles his money. A year later, the master comes back to the servants and asks, "How'd you do?" The guy with $3 said, "Amazing, I doubled my output." He said, "Blessed are you, for yours is the kingdom of heaven." The guy with $2 said, "All right," he essentially said, "That's pretty good." The guy that did nothing with the talents or the gifts that were given to him, the guy with $1, got the most aggressive banishment that we have in the gospel. Essentially, you will be, part of the gnashing of teeth and in the entire, suffering of hell. Essentially, is the way Jesus reinterpreted. What does that parable mean? Well, you can attribute it to a spiritual application that we must do a lot with the gifts we are given to advance the kingdom of heaven to the greatest extent we possibly can. But it also reinforces the argument that we should be productive people. That sitting around and just being in a commune is not necessarily anything that Jesus directed us to do in the Gospels. That we are given talents and gifts that we should do the most we possibly can economically and spiritually and in our communities on an individual type basis. So it's a long-winded answer to try to attribute an 1860s poorly written economic philosophy about sharing a bunch of stuff because people are somehow good, not good. Final thing is that this is the number one inconsistency with communists and Marxists. Number one, they're all atheists, so to try to use the socialist argument is crazy. But you look at Marx and you read Marx, he believes that human beings can be perfected. He believed that human beings are good, and that if you're actually put in a commune, that human nature will end up being right. We know through the entire teaching of Jesus Christ, he said, you are broken people, you are sinful by nature, you need me. He would never ever get close to endorsing a governmental or political philosophy in general, but he would definitely stay away from one where its core tenet is that, oh, you guys can be perfected eventually if you get in the right group and share stuff. No way. There is no evidence of that in the Gospels at all. I would make an argument that Jesus, if we had to put a label, he'd definitely be more libertarian, anti-state, freedom-loving. He talked a lot about freedom, did not talk a lot about collectivism in the four Gospels. So, hope that's helpful. And
great answer.
Thank you. Okay. So, thank you all. We're good, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys all for coming. We have a big conference coming up in Palm Beach in a couple of weeks. If you do want to get away from, we have a couple people coming, I hope. If you want to get away from Nicole here, we have Donald Trump Jr., Tommy Lahren, Greg Gutfeld, Jesse Waters, Judge Janine, Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager. You name it, they'll be there. It's tpusa.com/SAS. Short notice, but if you can find a cheap flight, you want to come, we cover your hotel. You can talk to Timon in that goofy shirt, or you can talk to Madison. It was so much fun having a conversation with all of you and debating the most failed ideology of the last 100 years. I guarantee you will see that video again. Thank you guys so much. So.